Greetings and welcome. I am Joffrey, and today it's about time that I explained just why I like EU5's trade system so much more than EU4's. You see, where in EU4, the trade system is static, with an overly complex amount of modifiers that do little more than make the number go up. You make more money. In this game, there's a larger focus on controlling significant points of trade where you can create your own markets. No longer, like in EU4, are you stuck to specific points of trade that are directed always ever flowing onwards towards the heart of Europe, and some places being objectively worse. You are fully capable of creating your own centers of trade, building up cities from the ground up based on valuable harbor locations, and turning West Africa no longer from being the Ivory Coast where in EU4 everyone siphons off wealth in whatever direction they so choose. You can instead make it the heart of trade in the world if you have the skill for it. And that is the core of why I love it so much. But there is much more to discuss. So let us begin. You see, whereas in EU4 there are various trade goods, and all of those goods have a value, EU5 takes it to the next level by making each good have a base value. However, that value and price goes up based on scarcity. Supply and demand exists to a degree. However, it is something that you can choose to keep in the background or focus on center stage and take control of it to make your country the truly micromanaged trade powerhouse you may well choose to make your playstyle focused around. So, some resources are easier to transport than others. There are things such as horses, which are very difficult to transport. Meanwhile, other things that do not in this list have a default transport cost are simply one. So it is twice as difficult to transport horses as it is to transport clay, which is the crux of what your merchant capacity is used for. You see, in EU5, you no longer simply focus on trade steering and trade power for just make number go higher because the resources are valuable and you have an arbitrary trade value that makes you money. In this game, it is all based on who owns the market center, which we shall get to in a moment. But it is also based on your trade capacity. Merchant capacity determines how much resources you can pull out of a region yourself or sell yourself. There are also ways that your burghers can do this on your own, and you can influence it by making buildings and researching certain techs. But now, what your power determines, the actual thing that you can still to a degree influence through the moving of your fleets to try and increase your presence in an area. They have a system known as maritime presence for that. In this, what your power does is no longer simply mean you get a greater share of the wealth. The person who gets most of the wealth is the person who owns the capital of the trade node. What having more power does is it means that you become prioritized for being able to make trades. It goes in order. You could think of it like a Dungeons and Dragons game. The person with the most power is like the person with the most initiative in D&D. Person with the most trade power gets to do all of their trades before anyone else gets access. So, if you have very little trade power in a region, you might simply be left holding the bag when there's no resources left that you want. If there's scarce resources, like your nobility wishing for wine, but everyone else has more power, so they gobble it up before you get the chance, that's tough on you, and you may need to solve that problem or face the consequences of an unhappy nobility, or worse yet, maybe your country lacks stone, and you can't construct many things as a result, so you might need to find alternative sources of stone to make your production happen. Because, unlike in Victoria 3, which many compared the system to, there is actually the possibility to simply not have a resource. Where in Wiki 3, if you do not have access to a resource, it simply increases the price by 75% or some such thing. However here, if you do not have horses, you can't make cavalry. Now to focus in on these needs, you can see that an example they have provided us of pops having needs that are unmet are the upper class of society in this trade region shown below, the needs in Riga. It's from Sweden's perspective, because Sweden is in the Riga trade region. They simply, as you can see here, Sweden is, at game start, within the Riga trade node, which means that Riga makes most of the wealth from trade in the Baltic as a part of the Hanseatic League, with Lubeck controlling the west. Whoever controls the market capital controls most of the wealth. They make a lot of money from trades being done. However, you can create your own, and it is speculated by Paradox that a player who is playing as Sweden after some years of preparation and conquest developing, you could in fact create your own trade capital in the southeast. I believe it was Kalmar, perhaps they said that would be the best location due to harbors. Now, you can see a map of the globe. Now this is what replaces what everyone knows as the trade estuaries and centers of trade that you expect from EU4. No longer do you have arbitrary points on the map that are simply better for all time. These are the locations that are more effective for harbor usage. However, that does not mean that they will be the places most effectively used. You see, there are many places around the Great Lakes, but it's unlikely within the scope of the game that those places will actually become valuable centers of trade. And there are a couple places in the British Isles. You see Ireland, for example. There are a couple places in the northwest. There's Cork, I believe, the south corner, that are very effective as they're very light colored. They're very good for having harbors. However, the population center, because the most effective farmland is on the east in Dublin. So it's quite possible that someone will choose to artificially force at a more expensive cost the harbor in Dublin to be stronger, and such it will remain the main center of trade, with these other harbors being lesser offshoots despite their natural affinity for the being good. Now here we can also see Stockholm itself is a better harbor, so perhaps I was wrong about Kalmar, which I believe is in the southeast. But these places, to refocus, these places are all much cheaper to make into better harbors and function naturally as better harbors, which counts for being more efficiently able to trade resources, to transport troops, and to have control over the lands in general. And one last thing that is important to mention about what gets traded along these trade nodes is that you aren't simply trading for goods, you are also trading for food, as what is important for creating these important centers of trade is making a large city that is in a place which is effective to reach by naval and land means through roads and harbors. But that means a lot of people, and food is a system that is required for these settlements to be able to support their large populations. Now, if you do not have prioritization in the trade region through having the most trade power, it's possible there simply won't be enough food to feed the needs of your citizens. And before I forget to mention, another crucial factor in trade is being able to get food. Not only do you want more market power for the ability to have prioritization for purchasing goods, you also need it for food. There is a surplus amount of food that exists in every market, unless there's a negative, which means people are going to be starving until that situation is resolved. But the ways that you can prevent people from leaving your market, and the risk of having a larger realm, or simply not being focused on trade much, is having your having your lands be dragged into someone else's trade region, their market. You see, this is the world's markets at game start. There's a lot of them, and it's a little confusing to look at sometimes. But the way to summarize what you are seeing here is that the more brightly lit one of these spotlights is, the more control the market has over a region. Where you'll have all of these regions that, in some of these places, do not even have much in the way of actual settled lands. You see, in the center of the Americas, you only have Cahokia with any settled land, and the Navajo, I believe, who are the other settled tribes in the entirety of North America, and as such, they're the only people that can generate their own markets. And even then, they have very little outwards control, as they are only tribal governments with little in the way of power outside of the settled land they control. So much so that the Mayan trade region technically extends all the way up to the coast because there is no one else. And that can be a problem if you are in, say, Europe, where you have the Bordeaux trade node, which you can't see the name of, and the Barcelona trade node. These are trade regions that have their capitals, say, Barcelona has its trade capital in Barcelona, surprisingly enough. This means that the owner of Barcelona makes the money and has control and has typically the first prioritization over any goods traded within this region. Now that means that Paris, as France is the ruler of these southern lands, both of these are controlled by someone that is not themselves, which means that any time they wish to construct something in this region, they are at the mercy of this other person's market. They need to purchase goods from these other people's markets, and they might not even be able to access the goods if the other person is taking up those resources instead. Now, what France wants to do is to either create their own market in the south that can contest the other nodes, or to take Bordeaux for themselves. That's the obvious answer. Or, finally, embargoing other people. No longer does embargoing it just hurts people's trade power in your region. What it does instead is provide market protection. One of the key things that is very exciting to me about this, there is the trade region warfare, the push and pull of market protection versus market attraction. You see, in a lot of these lands, they're still tweaking the modifiers and such, of course, but there is a lot of lands at the edges where the color gets very dim. This means that the market control is very low, and in fact there's a lot of land here in the Paris node that is quite gray and almost encircled, quite dark and almost encircled by the Bordeaux node, which means that if Aquitaine was able to just exert a little more market attraction on these other regions, they could add more wealth to their market, bring more people to come trade at Bordeaux instead of Paris. Now, if France was to embargo Aquitaine, they would increase their own market protection in the region, as well as reducing any of their opponents' market attraction in the area. That means that they could have a greater solidified control over their own lands in the area without having other people bring them into their own territory. So, now perhaps it is apparent why I love this system so much more than what we have in EU4. There is still an emphasis on gaining wealth through the extraction and trade of resources, controlling of important centers of trade, and other such things. However, if you are playing as Portugal, you no longer need to worry about people trying to siphon off your trade to an inevitable black hole that exists at certain locations within Europe. You can turn yourself into that gravitational center of trade in the world if you so choose, by ceasing this Sevilla trade node and instead making a Lisbon market that you pull all the wealth towards due to simply how attractive your market becomes over time with the power of your ships, your technology, your trading infrastructure you will construct in others' countries, and your diplomacy. Now, if you were Portugal and you wished to continue to colonize down through Africa and South America and make your way over to Goa, Goa would no longer be simply a place that gives Portugal a greater control over the local market to siphon more funds off. It is instead a much more visible, map painty thing, which I know that I and many of my friends who play the game enjoy a lot, painting the map in your color. This is just another way that you get to paint the map, I consider it, which in a simplistic way gets the dopamine spiked as numbers not only go up, but the color expands. You see, you would be creating your own Goa market, and as Portugal, grabbing more of the lands of India and pulling them into the Goa market so that they spend their wealth at your region, and you have prioritization in that land to send those goods along, to continue to be traded along your new network of established cities that you will likely be, cities and trading posts that you would make at valuable harbor locations with good fertility for having larger populations, sending the goods along this network all the way back to Europe as people continue to sell goods and add them to your node along the way. Genoa, perhaps, doing a similar thing, where while Genoa at game start does not have the power to create their own market in the Constantinople region, far from it, they have many outposts of control, which means that they may not be the ascendant power in the region yet, but if they increase their market power, they don't necessarily need to actually own the market capital to get some influence out of it, because they will still have a higher power than all of the Anatolian Beyliks, who they can pull influence from, force themselves to be prioritized for any trades happening, and then pull the goods along back with them towards Genoa proper, where they can be sold at a higher value to everyone else in the region. Though they do actually, I believe, control Kaffa at game start, which means that they gain all the wealth from this market. Perhaps Theodoro, it would be the next target. I know it would be for me, to gain a greater control over the southeastern Black Sea. And then, if you see Constantinople becoming weakened to, say, a rising power in Anatolia, perhaps that's the time to strike and solidify control over the Eastern Mediterranean's trade. But that is all from me for now. Thank you all for watching. I hope that you, if not agree with me, we're able to get something out of this. I look forward to seeing the comments down below. But for now, I'll thank you all for watching again. I really appreciate all the comments that I get on these new video types that I've been making. And I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.